All right, well, I think we are ready to go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone. Good evening. My name is Heather Miller. I am in adult programming here at the La Crosse Public Library, and I'm so glad you could join us this evening for our special presentation. Tonight we have authors Kathy Tynk and Christine Corvine here with sharing their wonderful story of Grief Reimagined. And we're also joined by one of the amazing authors that they have featured in the book, Bao Shang. So she's here as well, and we're going to hear her read one of the excerpts from her story. So I'm going to turn it over to Christine and Kathy because they have a wonderful program in store for you this evening.
Great. All right. Well, thank you again, everybody, for joining us. And we'll do a little, it'll be a little bit of mix of everything. I don't want to just talk, Catherine and I. And so we're going to mix it up a little bit. We'll tell a little background of the book, maybe have a little exercise or two that you can participate in. And then we have Bo, who is going to, as Heather mentioned, she's going to read from the book and tell a little bit about her background, which is very interesting. So first of all, I guess we'll just start off telling you about how this book came to be. It was about a year ago this time that Kathy and I discussed kind of building a resource of some kind to have all kinds of creative ideas for people that were maybe engaged in some sort of loss, some type of loss. And we both were in the helping profession, and we saw this need for having some kind of a resource because we saw lots of cool creative things being done when people suffered from some kind of loss, and not just the loss of a person. And so then Catherine was engaged in a program as a hospice support coordinator, and you can kind of tell us where it led or where it evolved from there, Kath, if you want to.
Sure. So actually, I was enrolled in a certificate program at UW-Madison. So I had been a counselor, school counselor, more specifically an international school counselor for the past 20 years, and came back and went back to my first career, which was medical social work. And as part of that transition to get back into it, I took a course called, it was a grief support specialist training course. And actually the culminating final project was, one option was to write a book outline. And that's how this book was born. And so as we were talking, and Christine is an art therapist, and with my background, working with people and supporting people in times of loss and in other times too. But we thought, gosh, wouldn't it be cool to interview a whole bunch of people and get, not because everyone has their own style and their own personality and their own background, and not just a whole bunch of people, but a whole bunch of diverse people too, and hear lots of different voices and amplify lots of voices about what has worked for them. Right. And so that's how the book was born.
Yeah, and with the question at the top of the page, and we'll go into a little more on the next page about our background, is to think about your resilience. Have people told you you're a very resilient person? Maybe you feel like you don't have resilience, and what it is. And what we do know that is resilience can lead to happier and healthier people and communities. And so really one of the prominent things that we learn so much about resilience, and that it is something you can cultivate, and that it's not that this is something that you can start to build now as in your toolkit. And so we'll take you through some ideas too along the way as we're doing the program. And I'm going to advance this. So here we are, Christine and Catherine, and who we are. And I, as Catherine mentioned, I'm an art therapist and have a long background in art and creativity and mindfulness. And we started with the book with some stories that we were familiar with, but what happened, the onslaught of the COVID pandemic, and we did not know that we were going to have this great loss, like the world loss that we are all experienced in the last year. When we started the book, we just knew that we wanted to write about, grief and loss, and but what the benefit was that with the pandemic, everyone was stuck at home. So we were very fortunate in that people were readily available when we emailed or called on them or wrote letters, whatever we had to do to get a hold of people. So that was one great benefit. And I know Catherine too can tell more about sort of how it evolved from the stories that even meeting Bo, how she.
Yeah. And I think it's true about a lot of the most meaningful experiences in your life. If you just kind of, when things just kind of start rolling and they come easy, and it sort of came like that for us. We had this idea. I didn't know if it would just come an outline or an actual book, but as we got going, things seemed to fall into place, and it kind of built like a snowball. You know, when you're rolling a snowball in the snow, it just got bigger and bigger and more of a passion project for us. And so, yeah, Christine. So you're gonna meet Bo Xiong in a minute, and she is a local, a pretty important person, I would say, in our local community, an author, farmer, lots of different things that she'll tell you about later. But I came to know her because I was watching a Wisconsin Foodie episode that she was featured in, and I was so intrigued by her story that she had agreed to have us retell the story in the book. So that's how I got to know her.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about resilience, and of course, everyone experiences trauma, loss. You can't get through life without having some sort of needing some sort of resilience in your life. And the process is sometimes it's much more painful to try to make it through, and sometimes not. It's important to note, as I mentioned before, that we can cultivate resilience, but that we need to, it doesn't have to determine the outcome of your life. And so when we utilize some of these creative strategies, and we'll talk about a little bit about some of the prominent parts. We divided the book into 4 chapters, and they're each a chapter of that focuses on how resilience can be used, whether might be individually or as a group, or if you might be experiencing some kind of long-term suffering and grief, and then a lot of creative activities too. So the first story, as I mentioned, we'd love Bo to read her story here. She is with, part of her website is themothhouse.org, where she has a whole website with her stories. And she wrote about a story called Grounded, or Catherine wrote it, but Catherine listed the story from her about her parents. So Bo, I'd like you to go ahead. You can tell us about yourself and your story.
Great, thank you. Yes, thank you, Christine. I'm Bo Xiong, and I am the founder of Independent Hmong Farmers Corp. The nonprofit helps brings awareness about the independent Hmong farmers locally here in Wisconsin, and specifically in the La Crosse area, surrounding areas. I'm also the founder of Moth House Press. You can go to mothhouse.org. We feature short stories, nonfiction stories that are free to the public, as well as Hmong folklore. And there's quite a few books that are published that can be linked toward through the website as well. One of them is called Folklore, and the other is a short book series called The Butchers. And if you can just, I can put it up in the chat in a little bit. And I think the story is about how my parents, actually I was a baby when they went through all this stuff. So it's actually just about them, to be honest. It's about, honestly, I don't have what they have. They went through losing land and cattle and their home, to living in the jungles, to fighting in the secret war among the Vietnam War alongside of the US, with the CIA and soldiers, and then starting a whole new life here in America. So I definitely don't have what they have to, in this day and age, to be that strong and to carry on. Honestly, like, just to have peace of mind. I don't know how they do it, but they're not the only ones. There's quite a few thousand people just like them within their generation that have similar stories and struggles. And I would like to read just a small excerpt from the chapter Grounded. Beauchamp resides in Wisconsin and is the child of refugee parents originally from a small village in Laos, Southeast Asia. During the Vietnam War, Beau's stepfather was recruited by the CIA to serve as a soldier for their secret war. Following the war, in exchange for his service, the United States government offered his family refugee status. Fearing for their personal safety in Laos, they accepted the offer. Beau was later born in a refugee camp in Thailand. She remembers the hardships of camp life, of entire days spent standing on a dirt road with her brother and sister, waiting for their mother to return home from work. If she earned enough to eat that day, they would eat. If not, they went without. Eventually, after a long and complicated process, taking several years, Beau's family was finally given sponsorship to the United States. It wasn't until Beau grew older that she realized the full impact of what her family lost by moving to America. Honestly, I feel like we lost a huge part of our culture. We came here with just the clothes on our backs and some folklore, and that was it. Eventually, Beau's family began operating a large garden in rural Wisconsin. Her mother and stepfather would wake up each morning, often before sunrise, to tend to the weeds, watering, planting, staking, and roping to ensure the maximum high-quality yield. They do everything by hand. Beau explained that her mother and stepfather were gardening back in Laos from the time they could hold a fork and spoon. For them, turning to gardening as their livelihood in America was the most natural and logical option. And so that was the excerpt from the chapter Grounded. Sorry. Are there the pictures that I can talk about?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah,
So I would like to talk about, here are some of the photos that are featured in the chapter. The upper left-hand corner, that's my mother picking out these fingerling potatoes. They look like fingers. There's an actual scientific name for them, but we've just never learned it. But they're quite delicious. Their skin is so thin, like a red skin or like a Yukon Gold, and they're buttery and they're easy to fry up or bake. They're one of our favorite finger foods. Below it is actually the pathway that leads to our garden, and we share this garden with 2 other farmers. I think there's approximately 4 acres there. So I know we do 2 acres and some of the farmers do 1, and there's another that does another one. To the top right corner, that's my mom in our little flower field. And the flower field changes every year. Like we put it at the beginning or in the middle or the end. We had to like rotate the crops around and the plants around just to make sure that the ground is, so that we're also taking care of the ground and we're not overutilizing it for certain roots. But I often have a camera with me. Either that was from actually an actual camera. I have a Canon camera, and sometimes I just love watching my parents work, even though I'm supposed to be working too. I just love watching them work. And I see my mother harvesting all these flowers, and she just looks beautiful in this field that she grows. And they adore their garden. They take pride in it. So when they see it growing, they go out, they take such good care of it. When they go out to harvest, they make sure to just harvest the ones that are ripened or the ones that are like ready to take from the field. And I honestly, I pay a lot of attention to the way they work, and I pay a lot of attention to the way they look in the fields. And I often take a lot of photos of them without them knowing it. Sometimes they'll get annoyed by it and they'll ask me like, "You're supposed to be working. Why are you taking photos?" But it's just a moment that I like to capture. They're not, like when they see it, they're really surprised that that's what they look like and that's what the garden looks like. And sometimes they request me to go out there and just take photos of them standing in their garden. But yes, I do that a lot. I love to just capture moments where they don't know that I'm staring at them while I'm supposed to be working. And then the photo on the bottom is just a whole bunch of raspberries that we usually have in our field as well. It was a little project when I was going to college. My digital photography teacher had assignments for us to do, and it was called Simplicity. And there was so much red, it was so vibrant that I had to put a tomato on it. So that's what that photo is. So simplicity. But these are the things they grow in their garden, and this is what the garden looks like. I want to say that my mother's hands, I love her so much, and those are her hands, and they weather some hardships, and that's why they look like that. But
Yeah.
like when I see them, I just have so much gratitude for my mother and her hands.
And what is it that you see, Bo, in your parents that, you know, do you notice anything that gives them resilience, you know, that they utilize on a daily or regular basis to help give them that resilience?
I think gardening to them is it comes very naturally, but it's also kind of like how people have their personal space. So like the gardens like their personal space. And like if people had, like, I would compare it to like yoga, something that will help
Mm.
ground them and
Mm-hmm.
help them meditate or get into that higher state of mind, or just
Sure.
like
The state of flow, right?
in their little space. Yeah. My parents find that in the garden. You would see them in different ends of the garden doing something they're supposed to be doing for a living, but they're in such a good space of mind, good space of frame. Like they're there, they're present, they're working, but they're, I don't know, I might be their happy place, but I mean, they would rather not be in the hot sun working all day long, but sometimes they take joy in it, like just
Yeah.
once in a while,
It
it's
is
where
their-
they'd rather be.
Their meditation. Well, I know on the page of that story, just as a side note, we included quotes along with all these stories, and several people that have purchased the book have commented to me about the quote that's on the page in Grounded that says, "They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds." And I think that's an interesting segue too to also some of the things that have been happening for the Asian culture, which we were talking about earlier when we were waiting for everyone to arrive in our space here. And maybe you want to touch a little bit about that.
Yeah, so again, for the, I don't know how it is for other cultures, but for the Hmong culture specifically, we lost a lot before we came to America. And like, it's true, all we had were our clothes and our stories and our traditions. But this is our home now. America is our home now. And my parents have been here for over 45 years, and I've been here for 30 years. I'm in my 30s. But it's hard to comprehend a lot of the terrible things that are happening to the Asian community. And it's kind of jarring that it also is happening here in our small little town where everyone knows everyone, and where my parents have made a home for more than 30 years. But just experiencing it ourselves recently, just experiencing some of the personal property damage, or just the racial slur that people are saying at my parents while they're working in their own garden, is a big eye opener to all the stuff that's happening around the world, all the inequality and all the injustice, hate, where it doesn't really have a place for it. I don't know if it's like people think because we're Hmong, specifically we're Hmong. And I mean, like, I've had people come up to me and talk to me very loudly in English, thinking I don't understand English at the market where I've been and for more than 10 years is it's still surprising to me sometimes. But I don't know what else to say. It is a challenge. It's like we do our best to just keep going. Honestly, this is our home, and we educate ourselves, and then we share our knowledge with each other, and we make sure that that we're watching out for, like, my parents are so old. My mom is 66 and my dad is 75 or 76. We bought the wrong candles for him this year, but but it's, yeah, they're old people, and they understand some English and they speak some English, but like I said, this is their home, and I think some people who don't understand that, and I don't know where the hate is coming from, but they honestly group us all together, like all Asians are from China.
Yeah.
Is like, I literally have people come up to me and speak Chinese to me, or like when I or like when I worked at a place of an occupation, I had people speak Chinese to me, and it's just professionals speak Chinese to me. They greet me in a foreign language, and I'm like, oh, hello. I can speak English just fine. Like, just
Yeah.
speak to me in English. but
Well, and one thing
But
is that you're keeping it alive through your folklore, and you could talk about Bo's also a prolific writer, and so that's part of your resilience of keeping the culture alive in your.
yeah, so that's part of what my my company Moth House is to also share more of Hmong stories and Hmong folklore, and a lot of them are nonfiction stories, and to just help record it, because all the stories are orally told. So there haven't been many books published, and I want to just continue the tradition of passing down stories to the younger generation as well. But like I said, I think the most part is like educating people about who we are. Specifically in this community in Wisconsin, there's a huge community of Hmong people. 90% of them at farmers market are Hmong vendors. And a lot of them are, your local neighbors and business owners. I mean, there's a few restaurant owners that are Hmong people as well. So I think it's important for people to know the difference, and to just be respectful, and to be educated about the different communities around them in their neighborhoods.
Yeah, I also agree. It's very important. And you said that so beautifully and so articulately. So thank you. I can hear the emotion in your voice.
Mhm.
Oh, thank you.
And so maybe if anyone has questions for Bo, they can put them up in the chat, and and otherwise we can. But she's going to share her website, and she said some free stories on it, as well as the stories that you, or the book. Is it a book now that you can purchase with your whole big longer story?
Yes. So the book is folklore, and you can find it. It's on the front page of the website. All the social media links are at the bottom as well. Also, the butchers is also on there, and then you could find pages to all the short stories as well on that main page.
Yeah, great. And that's they all include some kind of the folklore from your background.
Yes.
Yeah, that's okay. Great.
Yes, Hmong folklore and nonfiction stories.
So if you, before we move to the next part of the program, last parting words, Bo, is there anything that you think people now would be helpful for, curbing? Obviously we all want to show the utmost kindness for whatever culture it is, and we're all very aware of that. But is there any specific things that you have seen that have been very helpful for people to do in order to kind of help curb the racism that you're seeing?
I'm not sure, but sometimes when my boyfriend is he's Caucasian, and he has conversations with his friends, and they have conversation with their friends about about what they can do and to bring awareness, and just about being not more friendly, but I don't know, I guess just aware of what's going on in our own community and all the things. There's a lot of things happening within the last couple of years, and I mean, this is just one of the small issues that are arising, but I think we have a lot of work to do as a human race, and as a community. Like, I think a lot of things we do in our community matters. It will have a ripple effect on everything that goes out. Like all the relationships we have with people, the way we talk and the things we do, and especially social media. I mean, it could be used for such a positive thing. Platforms could really resonate and radiate positive messages, and sometimes they could also also rally really bad things.
Mhm.
But I think it's like it's how you use it, and it's how you spread information. Like information is so important, and knowledge is very dangerous, and like it can really help build a community and heal people, or it could really hurt people. So I mean, like talk to people, and talk to your friends and your family, and people that you know, and just help spread the awareness of what's
Yeah.
going on all the
You've got
like
some,
all the
you've got
time.
some, sorry, you've got some more questions here from listeners.
Oh, good.
Oh, great.
So Katie asks, what is one thing you wish people understood about your culture, race that is a misconception? So one thing, if you could pick just one thing, I know you've said a couple already, but what is the
Gosh, misconception. There's quite a few. Oh, now my mind just went blank. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
That's always happens.
I know you talked about just wanting to not group all Asians as one big group, that you're all very there's lots and lots of different people that maybe are under the umbrella of being Asian, but have very distinct cultures.
Yes, everyone, there's like over 40 Asian countries. And I mean, we don't have, the Hmong people don't have their own country, period. America is our home. We're like gypsies, not to group us with gypsies, but wherever our people have landed, they adapt to the culture. They speak those languages, and they adapt to those cultures. Like there's half Hmong, half Chinese. There's Hmong people in the high mountains of Laos and Thailand, and they've integrated their clothing, their like traditional clothing, to some of those culture, and us too. Like in America, like I love to wear jeans and t-shirts, and I love pasta, and I eat tons and tons of it, and it's and oh my gosh, I don't know, like my brother loves. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Katie said your response was beautiful. And we have a question from Kurt. Kurt asks, thank you, Bo. Do you feel even apart from your parents, and that you have been raised in two different cultures? So you talked about that at the beginning.
Yes, I am. There's very few of us that speak Hmong and English. Like the younger generation only speaks English and understands very little Hmong, and the older generation mostly speaks Hmong and understands some English. But there's a huge like culture divide and gap within my own community. It's very crazy, and that's why I've decided to write these stories, so that the younger generation, like my nieces and nephew, can actually enjoy them and understand more about our culture. But yes, there's a huge culture gap between us, and I have been raised in two completely different cultures. Like my parents are so conservative that like 15 years ago, they wouldn't hug us. I've been hugging them forever now, that they're hugging people back now. They're hugging me back now. They're hugging, my nieces and nephews, and they understand the concept of love and affection through like embracing people. But before, if I put food on the table and clothes on your back and a roof over your head, that's love, and don't expect more than that. But like it definitely, like they are slowly, like they're accepting of my boyfriend. He's white. So like
they're coming around, but it sounds like part of your mission in writing might be to help bring your families together and your community together even closer.
I hope so. I hope that. I mean, like the main goal of it is to just reach a wider audience with these stories, because I didn't want it to end with my parents. Like I didn't want them. The stories to just never be heard again or spoken of again, because they're orally told stories. So yes, I mean, if it can do more than just being heard or read, definitely that is a plus.
We have one more question from Joyce. Would you or your parents ever hope to see Laos today?
My parents have visited Laos. They have been searching for their homeland, and they have not had any luck, because Laos is one of the most bombed countries in the world, and they come from tiny little villages high up in the mountains, and they have not been able to find their homelands. They've been there a couple times. I have never been there, but they have, and every time my father comes back disappointed, because he could never find where his last home was. But but yes, they have seen Laos a couple times, and they love going there, and they love visiting the villagers where they have like distant relatives. My mom still have people from her brother's side, and her brother lived there until he passed away a few years ago, and he's 15 years older or 20 years older than her. So yeah, that's still home to them. They still talk about it a lot. They have so many stories from it that whenever they talk about home, it's Laos to them. Yes.
And how about you? How about for you? Would you like to go there?
I would, but I'm so comfortable with like flushing toilets and a clean bath. Like, I love soaking in bubble baths, and like that's one of my fears is like staying clean. Because when they bring videos back to me, they literally visit these villages out in the middle of nowhere, and that
Right,
scares me a little bit. It's like camping in the middle of nowhere. But I mean, but with authentic Hmong people, and like it's culture shock to me. But it's and the videos are fun to watch and very educational and informative to me, and it makes me feel like I've not experienced a part of my identity because I have not met those side of my relatives. But I have this fear that I won't survive very long out there.
Yeah.
Plus mosquitoes and bugs, like I swell up like a lobster. So
That's a fair answer. Okay.
Yeah. So besides going to your mothhouse.org website and checking out your books and your stories, and where can they find your folks are at the farmers market?
yes. So May 1st is when I think the very first market opens. It's in Biraco, but then very soon in May also Cameron Park is opening, and we're usually like the first 3 or 4 vendor that is there. And it's a small community of Hmong farmers, so everyone knows everyone. I'm like related to quite a few of the other vendors as well. This year I'm actually a board member of the farmers market board members. So so there's that. Is very interesting. And and then we also have Sunday's market. If you're on a budget, Sunday's market is the best market to go to because everything is literally like $1 or $2 there because of the wide variety of food and of all the vendors out there. I think there's like more than a dozen Hmong vendors, and so it gets very competitive.
Wow.
So
Well, that's a good tip though.
yes. So Sunday market is it won't start till June, I think, and it is at Onalaska Festival Foods parking lot. So if you're on a budget, definitely there is the best place to shop, and they have tons and tons of food. And vendors from outside of La Crosse, who are Hmong vendors, also come here because it's usually every market you pay a fee to, but Festival Foods hosts that market, and it's free to the vendors as long as you sign up ahead of time.
Nice.
But yeah. And then and at the end of the day, usually all the vendors donate whatever they can to the Hunger Task Force. So
Wow.
anyway,
Nice.
and a lot of people wait till the end of the day to bargain with the vendors as well. But yes, so that's what's going on this year.
Great. Good. Well, lots of great ways to support you and everyone in the community. So that's great. Well, and Bo, I hope you're going to hang around for the other kind of half of this program, and we'll tell you a little bit more about the book. And then if you have questions, you can pop them up in the chat area, and Kath can keep an eye on the questions and let you know. So okay. Great. All right. Thanks for sharing with us.
Yeah.
We'll go on and tell you a little bit about this. Is I think the most really kind of interesting bit about our research, researching all of these stories was we did a lot of research also for developing a course called Overcoming Compassion Fatigue, and read a lot of different research studies. And this one, and we'll kind of tag team this, we can tag team this, Kath,
Sure.
was about examining the power of rituals and how it can maybe alleviate loss in more of a more mundane context. So people, I'll just tell the first part, and then Kathy, you can tell the next part. So people were told in this research study, and there's a lot of different formats of this research, but this is the one that to me is the most intriguing. They were told they'd be part of a random drawing, which they could win $200 on the spot. And so they took the group of people and selected a few people to win the $200 and sent them on their way. And so it was
actually that's, I'll just gonna jump in here a little bit.
Oh.
So they had two groups of people, and
That's the next slide.
One person was gonna win the 200, one person.
Yeah. So and then they had them, they said that they had them write about ways they'd use the money to make the pain of loss even worse. They asked the participants to think about and write about the ways that they would use the money than if they did. So then now you can, do you want to tell them about how they divided the group? So
basically there were two different groups, and one, so the first group, the second group, they told them, okay, how do you feel? They didn't do a lot of processing, and they just had the say, well, you lost, you didn't win the money, and they had people leave. The first group, they actually did a little bit of a ritual. They thought, what's the craziest ritual? Well, we'll use salt. We'll throw salt over our shoulders, count up to 10, do a little ritual. And the people that actually did something to process their loss and actually tear up the piece of paper about their feelings, they got over the loss quicker, and they fared better than the people that didn't do anything. So we thought that was really interesting, because it shows us it doesn't really matter so much what you do to recognize and acknowledge your feelings about losing something. It's more the fact that you actually do it.
Right. And that what they found throughout the different studies that they did this in was that really the more idiosyncratic, it didn't have to have, the ritual didn't have to have a spiritual connotation or anything, but the more idiosyncratic, so the more that it had meaning for you, was dependent on how much more powerful it was for the person. So here's a little exercise that you can all do at home. And if you've got a piece of paper and a pencil, great. If you don't have it near you, that's fine. You can just think about this in your head. But for you to think, a piece of homework is to think about how you might create a new ritual. So if you're going to make a list and list it to 3, the first thing on your list would be listing items that give you comfort. So it could be things like a favorite mug or a sweater. Maybe it's an object that you got somewhere. And so for your first column, just make a nice list of things that are things that give you comfort, small, large, whatever it would be. And then on your second list is actions that you use to comfort yourself. So if it is making tea, just you can just brainstorm and make this whole big long list. Making tea, writing a letter, taking a bath, taking a walk, whatever it is.
It could be saying a prayer. It could be something like that too.
Right. Yeah. Whatever kind of thing that brings you comfort. And then for your third list, to make places that make you feel comfortable. So when you're at home, or as a specific place at home, like maybe it's when you're on your porch, or you're in your bedroom, or your bath, whatever it is that is kind of comfort to you. And so to create your own little rituals, you sort of pick and choose out of these 3 lists to kind of create your own ritual. And really the quirkier it is, the better, because everyone's probably got some sort of ritual that, or heard of someone with like a sports team. So they always wear so-and-so's jersey because they know they're going to win. So just try for your homework to come up with your own new ritual. Maybe it's something you can incorporate as a family. Maybe it's just for you, and try it out just to see if it's something that makes you feel, comforts you. So as we mentioned, the results, those that engaged in rituals reporting feeling more comforted by the little ritual that they did perform. So our book then is a lot about rituals. That's the reason that we kind of talk about this, is we talk about rituals that came about just sort of as a serendipity. And the book is divided into 4 chapters. The first chapter is alone. So these are ceremonies or rituals or things that you can do by yourself that you don't need other people to participate in. And one of the really interesting early on stories we found was it's called the wind phone. And it was in Japan. And Japan in 2013 suffered a great tsunami, and there was a lot of loss, and a lot of homes actually were lost. A lot of life was lost. And a particular man was mourning not only the death of his wife, but he was also mourning the loss of another family member. And he had a beautiful garden that he loved to tend to. And he happened to find this phone booth that he loved the look of. So he installed it in his garden. And then one day he got the notion to put a phone in the phone booth. And he thought maybe he would just call on the phone. Everyone that was missing a family member that perhaps they would be comforted to, they would just dial the number. You know, in the old days, now we don't remember people's numbers, but in the old days, there was always some phone number that everyone knew one person's number by heart. And so what would happen, what came to be after he made this wonderful little telephone booth with the phone in it, and this is the interior shot from that phone booth, is people just started to come from all over the country to come and call their relatives on the phone, because as he explained in the story, he knew they couldn't hear them, but he was hoping his words would flow on the wind. He knew there was no cable line, but it was the whole ritual, the whole process of getting in the booth and dialing the number and talking on the phone. And so that was a wonderful alone ceremony that we shared in the book that you can.
Chris, I think for the next three, we should go through a little quickly because we need to leave time for questions.
Okay.
And we're
Sure.
at the last 10 minutes. Yeah.
Yep. So go ahead.
Yeah,
You can do the
the
next
second one is connecting with others, and stories about things that you can do with another person. And then the third one are creative tools, art, music, and more. So there we incorporated, those are sound bowls that you're seeing right there from Tom Roberts. Some of you might know Tom Roberts. He's a local person that does classes on the healing of sound, and he has a story in the book too. And then the fourth one is integration. So that's more lifelong living with grief. So it's things that you integrate, and those are stories that where people have brought things in for their whole life. So for example, you see someone walking in the forest or forest bathing as a way of self coping and self-soothing. And by the way, the other thing I would say about our book that was a really, really big discovery and a great thing for us to learn about is how self-care is self-care. So the same self-care that you might use for one circumstance, you can apply to another. And so that's the hopeful bit, I think, is that we all can pull together tools, and they can be tools by ourselves, with others, using other things, creative means, and integrating them into our lives. And then the last bit, yeah.
So do you want to follow up with this, or
you can go ahead with this one?
So and so this is just sort of points to ponder about becoming resilient is prioritizing your relationships that we tend to isolate when we have grief. And one of the most important parts of being a resilient person is to keep those connections. So that if you have any kind of loss that you might be suffering from, is to continue with your connections. Don't isolate, and make a date, even if it's that one person, even if you're not chatting with them, but to keep connections with people is very important. Fostering wellness, which is the sleep, eat, exercise, practicing mindfulness. You can do meditation, journaling, praying, gratitude, finding purpose and meaning. And that's what this book is all about, is giving that sort of sixth component to grief, where we find meaning in our loss. And then embracing healthy thoughts, which is paying attention to how you think. And there's a lot of positive psychology out there that you can refer to, but taking stressful events and not just reacting to it, but responding. And that's the purpose of the book, is that we can be a little more mindful when we're experiencing all these tragedies or grief or stress, where we can respond a little more. And then, of course, if you are deep in grief, and there's nothing that is helping at the time, to be sure to seek help if need be. But the book is just to help those, even if you aren't suffering loss. It's good to create that toolkit ahead of time and finding all the things that give you comfort and are self-care for you. And here's a list of the book, local bookshops and spa, Sundar Spa, that have it. On my website, it's available, and it's coming soon to other online resources, but that's where we are now.
We just really want to thank
And
everybody for being here.
Yeah, and we'll have, this is just a quick story. If you can think about what's happening in the picture here, you may not know, you may know this story, but this was from 2012, and there was a Spanish runner and a Kenyan runner, and they were in a high profile running event. And I think his name is Abel, who was the Kenyan runner. He was in the lead, and Ivan was from Spain, was behind him. And Abel, they were coming to the finish line, and he slowed down. And Ivan was behind him and yelled, keep going, you're not at the finish line. And because what happened is Abel didn't read the signs. He was Kenyan, he couldn't read the Spanish signs, so he didn't know and understand. He thought he had already crossed the finish line. And so Abel said, no, keep going. And what he's doing is he's pointing him and he's pushing him to finish the race. And so, and did not, but Ivan could have overtook him because they were that close to the end, and he could have won the race. But later the journalists went up to him and they said, well, Ivan, how, you had this grab, you could have closed in on him and overtook him on the race. And why didn't you do that? And Ivan said, the Spanish runner said, well, my dream is that we're going to have the kind of community in life where we help each other. And he said, what would the merit be of my victory? He said, what would be the honor of that medal? And I love the last thing he says is, what would my mother think? And that's why we're telling these stories, is because we believe in a community life. And a community life is where we share people's stories of heroism and sportsmanship and the triumphs and tragedies. And when we take that opportunity to build community and help each other out, that's when we all win. So that's the end, the last story. Have to throw a running story in there.
Great.
So if there's any other questions, we'll entertain questions, or for Bo or Catherine, Christine, anyone else. Or the book is at the library. Heather they checked in the copy. So if you want to check out the copy, it's not checked out right at the moment, right?
Okay, so we have, Katie says I could listen all night. Thank you, Katie. That's very nice of you. Kurt commented again, have you been contacted much on how to handle resilience in our pandemic? I would say yes, we get a lot of questions about the pandemic and how to handle resilience. And we actually have a story in the book that talks about humor during the pandemic. And I'll save that for you, Kurt, if you get a chance to take a look at it. Okay, so Scott says, which story was most impactful to you in your research? What do you think?
I would say, well, the very last story to me is about Jarvis Masters. And some of you out there might have read his books. They may be at the library. Heather, maybe you can answer this question. Jarvis Masters is a death row inmate at San Quentin Prison in California. And he wrote two books, Finding Freedom and The Bird Has My Wings, or something about the bird and the wings. And he writes in the story about, when you lose everything. So think about losing your life, your family, your freedom. How do you handle that? How do you build resilience from that? And so we have his story as the last story, and that was really impactful to learn about his life. freejarvis.com, I believe, or .org is his website, because he was they've got a lot of evidence of wrongly convicted for this death sentence, but it's taking years, as everything does in this system, to override that. But he overcame so much and turned out to be a prolific writer. He works with a teenage theater company in producing plays, and he's done so much with his life that to me, that was when you to realize that you can lose everything in your life and still make a difference was really impactful for me.
And I think for me, different stories hit me at different times and were impactful in different ways. And I loved when one story led to another story. And so I get so excited. And I know we have Kelly here listening. She's one of our contributors in Travel to Breathe. And so thank you, Kelly, for being here. And
She's got a great story.
yes. And we have a message from Pat, who says, love the compilation of stories that broaden what grief is and give ideas for each of us. Thank you, Pat.
Yeah. And one thing I think what we kind of comment on in the back of the book is after you read, there's 50 different stories. You can do a whole book club with the whole stories. You can do it with someone or one individual, is that to visit things that maybe would be out of your comfort zone that you normally wouldn't take part in, because sometimes where we get empowered and find the most growth is when we tackle a few things that are out of our comfort zone. So maybe you've tried something and you thought, oh, that's a silly, I would never, go forest bathing. That's silly. Well, maybe you haven't tried it in the right place or with the right person, or so if you're stretching, trying to find ways to find rituals and activities that bring self-care for you, start at the beginning. Start with number one and try it out, give it a try. If it doesn't work, go on to the next one. So
we've got Kelly here. Thanks for the shout out. It was a pleasure to be part of the project. It's awesome. And then Katie, again, if anyone's lost someone due to drugs or alcoholism, I urge you to try Al-Anon. Coming together and sharing raw grief has helped me become a better person. We all have injuries, but different scars, and we need not to be alone. That's so true. And
yeah,
we do have a story about support groups and the importance of support groups. So thank you for bringing that up. That's great.
Well, is there any other question for Bo? It could be for Bo, anybody.
You have anything, Heather?
I think you guys touched everything. That was amazing. Thank you so much. If anyone else have any final parting questions before we wrap up for the evening?
Looks like we're good.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. We appreciate your attention, and try to figure out a ritual. That will be your homework for leaving this, is find a ritual, a family ritual or an individual ritual that you can engage in, that you can incorporate into your life that on a regular basis.